My guest on Lead with Storytelling is none other than the affable Lorraine Peters. She is a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a business person. Lorraine Peters, Lorraine has many passions and hobbies, but one thread cuts across them, and that is achieving one's fullest human potential. She uses her strengths and talents from over 40 years to help newcomers accelerate their integration here in Canada. She has a unique lens that helps her convey her thinking through, and that includes a former modeling career, five-time pageant winner, sales management, and entrepreneurship. Lorraine is an avid reader, gardener, still actor, and she is set to break a world record competing at one of the most prominent pageants in the world this summer 2024 at age 58. Can you beat that? Well, without further ado, it's time to hear her story.
So, I have with me Lorraine. Lorraine, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Toshi.
I'm a big fan. I think the first time we met was, I first met you while working, and I still work with the St. John Newcomers Center. And my first impression of you, having engaged you, being engaged, by you on a formal, in a formal setting, was when you took up or facilitated a session on time management. And your energy struck me. Your energy, the way you connected with us in the audience, was quite electric. And I haven't taken, that experience out of my mind. At least nothing has. And I've followed your story since then. It's resonated with me. With your online engagements, your work in the community. And I've come to see you as a bridge between cultures, especially, as I would say, a leader, a community leader who has made or, paid her dues and continues to pay her dues in making St. John a welcoming place to newcomers. And I can't help but make mention of this, that I think you're one of the few who really use storytelling in the way that you convey messages, whether it's messages about enhancing images, enhancing people's self or personal development in different capacities, and I found that really interesting, the way that you've masterfully been able to use tools of the platforms and language in which you deliver your messages to be quite impressive and quite very inspiring. And I would say kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
So I got in touch with you just to, kind of riff off. Well, it really started off as, the intention was to actually riff off your interest in Jordan Peterson. You were reading the 12 rules, and I was like, oh, yes, your fellow Canadian. I mean, since I got to St. John, everybody's been asking me, have you read any Canadian authors? And I'm like, yeah. Well, if everyone has watched Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, I'm sure they've had their first introduction to Canadian literature somehow. But when you then bring in Jordan Peterson, you're taking it up another level.
It is like nothing like jumping right into the deep end, Sochi. I mean, I don't know of a more controversial personality right now than Jordan Peterson, and he has replaced, for me, Dr. Phil. I always used to amaze how much I could relate and almost predict how Dr. Phil was going to react to something or rationalize something, and I find that same comfort in Jordan Peterson, except his language is just so like expansive and thought-provoking, and I find myself having to stop and look up words. The old saying that if you're the smartest one in the room, you should find some new friends. Well, that's kind of how I'm feeling, because I feel really dumb when I'm reading his stuff because I have to stop. But it's such a great way to learn and expand your vocabulary, which, back to your point about storytelling, many years ago, I was at a modeling and acting conference, because, as you know, that's my industry since I was 19 is modeling, and I attended a acting seminar within the weekend of the conference, and the acting coach, the facilitator, she put us through a number of exercises, and she said to me, "Your way of communicating is storytelling. You're a natural storyteller, so really, really lean into that and do that as a way of teaching, entertaining, conveying information. Be a storyteller, because that's what you are naturally." And so I really listened to that assumption of me, and thank you for picking up on that, because I find when you can rely on a more expansive vocabulary, layering that in with great storytelling, it bonds people to what you said. It's not just a collection of words and sentences that people forget. It's a way for them to have that moving picture in their head that resonates with them, that sticks with them. And so I don't know, as everybody, I think storytelling is a skill. I think some people have it innately. I think I did have a bit of a natural storyteller in me, about how to start it and build on it and fill in the middle and round out the end. But I think people can learn how to be a storyteller, and I think it's a great way to connect with people.
I agree. I mean, to borrow a few words from you, in terms of leaning into your strengths, I think I wouldn't say I've worked in marketing communications all my life. I think I had 5 years of my professional career doing something else at first, before finally leaning into that side of me. But I've come to find over the years that storytelling is, I think it's a primal need. It's a primal need by the storyteller, and also the person being told the story. I mean, we all want to hear a story. Anyone listening to us right now wants to know more. But we'll only be assessing the value of what we're telling them by the way we tell them, by the way we, our inflection, the words we use. Like, you've been engaged by Peterson's vocabulary. And I think that primal need is, we all pick it up, or rather pick up on it, at different points in our lives. And I think for you, at the time that it's, really worked out for you, I think it was really, really important that it happened then, because now you can harness all of these life experiences and all of these insights that you've learned from what you are doing or what you plan to do, and you finally found a framework which we could actually communicate that. And I think that's quite valuable to note. Thanks for that. But that's a good seg into so you're quite an interesting person. I'm sure we can have another conversation about being a multi-talent, what they call them now, being a luminal person. So many talents, and I think with your extensive background in in sales, consultancy, and modeling. Tell me, how do you manage all of that?
Here's the thing. I'm 58, so I have a lot of years behind me now. But Yes, I started out in modeling. It's what I wanted to do when I was a young person, and I went away at age 18 and did that for a couple of years, and then moved back to New Brunswick. But all of those things that you just mentioned, I did them all in parallel to one another after that point that I moved back to New Brunswick as a young person. So because my loves of my life are modeling, fashion, pageants, I did pageants starting since I was 15. Even when I had to get a big girl job, right, and support myself, I still stayed very connected to those things that I loved and pursued as a young person. So I always stayed engaged in modeling. I would go away to Montreal once in a while and model. I always modeled locally and regionally. I've always taught modeling and self-improvement and personal development. And I did that, starting in 17, I opened L Models and Personal Development Academy. So, but in all of those years between when I was, when I opened L Models, I was always doing all of that stuff in parallel to having my corporate job in sales and business development. And before I left, my last job was managing a division for a technology company and the sales team and the business development for Atlantic Canada. That's kind of how far I went in the corporate world. And then I left that in 2007 to do personal training full time. Because again, in parallel, from my early 20s, when I got so interested in fitness and nutrition and well-being and wellness coaching, I was doing all of that also while I was working that corporate job, teaching fitness classes at all of the gyms, doing military testing for the YMCA, doing all that in parallel as my hobby while I had my full-time job. So to some people, they might think, oh my God, how many lifetimes does one have to do all those things? But I was doing them all at the same time because they were my hobbies and my passions. So I hope that puts it all into a little bit more perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I was really looking for that perspective and how you managed to switch lifetimes, because some people, I really envy those who have just one thing. I mean, that's enviable if you're able to focus on one thing. But if you're able to have three things, four things that so easily switch between, I mean, that's
Yeah.
different lifetimes.
And I think, the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Well, I was just not prepared to. I love modeling and fashion and pageants. It's not so much a thing around here, not even so much a thing in Canada, but it's a big part of what I love. And so I always found ways to, stay plugged into it, as small as it might be. And even acting, I appeared in a Stephen King movie that was being remade by New Brunswick
No.
directors.
You have to tell
Yeah,
us. Don't tell me you signed an
I'm
NDA.
in,
Don't tell us.
I'm in a horror film. I was concerned woman number one.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no. So, we have one life, right? And my whole philosophy in life, especially as I get older, is we have a obligation to ourselves to be courageous and to not leave any stone unturned. It's not always going to be easy. It means doing scary stuff sometimes, especially if you're, you know, a little different, or maybe you naturally don't fit where you're trying to go. It is your obligation to your life and to the people around you that you act courageously, and that is a fundamental belief of mine. And even more so the older I get. And this is kind of a crazy world we're in right now. It's not easy to be in this world right now, and I think you have to really know who you are. You have to be willing to stand up for that. And you also have to have real courage to be able to honor what you want to do, what your values are, what your beliefs are, and move on those when other people might not see it the same way. When we talk about leadership, and that's why I'm really reading a lot right now about a lot of different things, because I think that's what's going to get me through this, is having as wide a view as I can of different people's perspectives, My work with newcomers certainly fills that hole of giving me different perspectives from different cultures. But reading is a really big part of my life right now because I want to have as many different takes on things as I can, so that as I act courageously, I'm also acting respectfully. People run these days with a lot of partial information, and that's very dangerous. I don't like that. I think the more, so Brene Brown is, because I do want to weave books into this, because I know that that's the premise of what you're trying to do here, Sochi. So Brene Brown is a researcher. I forget which university, doesn't matter. She's an amazing author, many, many books. One of them is Atlas of the Heart. Very, very thick book. I did it on audio. So she's a researcher of feelings and emotions, if you can imagine. So she has broken down hundreds of feelings and emotions because her philosophy, her foundation of her research is that the better you can understand and identify feelings and emotions, the better equipped you are to make your way through things, difficult times, emotional upset, communicating with others. Fundamentally, that's what she's doing, is helping people communicate better by understanding your feelings and emotions. And she says that the opposite of courage is not fear. That's what most people would say. If you said, what's the opposite of courage? They'd say, well, fear. No, the opposite of courage is armor. I'm going to explain this. People who are courageous, truly courageous, they're willing to have their principles or what they believe or what they think they know for sure. They're willing to open up, be vulnerable, and have those tested, and maybe even disproved, which would force them to have another opinion, right? That's courage.
Yeah.
The opposite, being armor, is when people have their thoughts, their beliefs, their values, what they know to be true, and then they armor that. And you can't get anywhere near that. You can't challenge it. You can't ask them to debate it. I have a real life example of that from my own life. My father was a really, really brilliant man. He was very well thought through, and he loved the Bible. He wasn't a church-going person, but he loved reading the Bible. There are so many sticky notes in his Bible because he studied it. But he believed every word of the Bible. And so you could never have a conversation with my father or a debate or ask him to entertain another possible side to some of the stories or claims, because he had that armor. In that area of his life, he was not courageous. He had the armor up, that is not up for discussion. We're not talking about that. We're not disputing it. I'm holding on to this. And so this is a long-winded way of me saying that I think for leaders today, old and new ones coming up, especially with dealing in Canada, let's say, dealing with so many newcomers and weaving them into the fabric of the communities, but also into the workplaces, our leaders really need to be courageous. And what I mean by that is Brene Brown's definition, which is to let that armor come down, be willing to see where you have some blind biases, right? That's vulnerable for a leader of a company or a corporation or a division to allow themselves to be that vulnerable in search of the truth and the betterment of their job or their organization. That's a big step to say, you know what? I'm going to take down this armor for a bit. I'm going to let my protection drop for a moment, and I'm going to hear what's being said to me. I'm going to consider that maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not seeing this the way I could or should. So when we talk about leadership, I think that's where younger leaders need to focus their time, because we are in a cancel culture and people are scared to speak their truth, speak their mind, even if it's just to get a conversation going, right? People are scared to open the conversation if it doesn't fall between the goalposts that they've said they're allowed to talk about.
Yeah,
if this is the goalpost and they're out here, whoa, don't go there. But what if the truth is on the other side of that? Don't get me going.
No, 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 no. You have carte blanche on this one. And it's quite interesting that you mentioned Brené Brown, because she I wouldn't say identifies, she not out either. She brands herself as a researcher and storyteller. And it shows the depth to which she's really influenced you, because at the heart of her research is how, I mean, you talk about leadership, you talk about courage, but quite interestingly she talks about vulnerability. And that was quite interesting how you weaved that into the explanation you just gave, because and I think, to wrap it up, the Brené Brown plug actually brings me to the question: um, what would you say, or how would you say, professionally, right, and personally, and I got a hint of this really, reading as a catalyst, for your own personal development. Now, we already have a story and somewhat of something of a timeline, between your professional career to what I would say you might say is your hello, hello, hello. Who do we have here? What I might say is a new phase in your life where you are, you know, taken out of that, well, or that wellspring, to actually feed and empower others. I just want, a little bit, just elaborate a little bit on how you use reading to fuel yourself,
Yeah.
feed yourself, but also to empower, in giving out, in reaching out, and empowering those you meet and engage.
Yeah. So, like I say, I've just compelled, lately, the last year or two, to really dive into reading as much as I can, to be that, to facilitate the growth of my courage through being well informed. Back to my previous point, that there seems to be an epidemic of people giving opinions on major things without a lot of information.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you're never going to have all of the information that you have. But for me, reading is a way to expand on thoughts that I can share with people, especially since I'm asked to do a fair amount of speaking, as you know, speaking, presenting, mentoring, that kind of thing. I think it's incumbent on me to be as well informed about certain ideals or philosophies or ways of thinking,
Yep.
Cultural things. Like, it's important that I have a wide lens to do that through. And so reading as many different things. I think I have 5 books on the go right now, and I'm really getting into audiobooks, because if I'm on the road for an hour, that's a great chance to hear my books. I have Jordan Peterson's. My husband bought me both books for Christmas, but I also back them up with the audiobooks. So I read at night when I'm in the bathtub, and then I listen in my car as I'm going to and from. So I have about 5 books on the go right now, and I've never read fiction in my life. I No, I've always read self-help
Yeah.
and, things like that. But last summer, I did pick up The Way of Water because Oprah recommended it and said it was the best piece of literature she's ever read. So I was like, well, clearly I have to read that. I'm still not through it. But reading for me, back to your question, as a catalyst to how it helps me do what I do and serve people in the way that I try to, is that it gives me language. It gives me it's thought provoking. It primes the pump for me to think about what I've read in a meaningful way and put that into a dialogue that I can share at certain points that might resonate with somebody else. But it really is a way to get my own organic thoughts, opinions, and beliefs stirring in my mind. Like I have an opportunity to go into a company and help their leadership with some of the challenges that they're having with bringing in newcomers. Just as an example, if you are a company that is assembly line in nature, but you're committed to having newcomers on your payroll, but you're an assembly line as an example, and then you have somebody who says, well, I need the month off for Ramadan. Okay, but how do we do that? Right? So if I'm going to go in and inspire the leadership or uncover areas where they could be doing things differently, better, whatever, I need to have as 360 a view as I can possibly have. I need to use my imagination and think, okay, what are they experiencing, right? What is both sides? And so the more I can read and the more I can have my pump primed with my creative thinking, the better I'm going to be as I do this job that I'm trying to build on the last couple of years, which is serving the newcomer community.
Absolutely.
Very complex. You can't just be married to your own, ideas, right?
Yeah.
You have to expand how you think and see things. I love it when I hear something that completely blows one of my long held ideals out of the water. I love when that happens, and from time to time when I'm asked to do keynotes or teach a workshop, I often tell my audience that I don't need you to like me or what I say. I actually hope that what you say about me is, whoa, I didn't think about it that way before. That's what I hope, is that something I've said actually forces people to say, I just never thought about it like that before. That's way better than a compliment of, oh, I liked her or I agreed with her.
Oh my God. I just love the way that you brought the benefits of, cultural awareness, to the as a function or as a value from you derive from reading. And I think that brings me to the question, when you have your sessions, and I know you came prepared because you told me so, right? When you have your sessions or such sessions, what kind of books do you recommend to people who are looking to expand their cultural awareness? It doesn't have to be fiction,
For specifically cultural awareness? Oh, goodness. I don't know as I'm reading any specific to cultural. Let me think. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be spot on. It could be adjacent. So yeah, it's a good starting point. That's a good starting point, rather.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what I'm reading or have read in the very recent past.
So go ahead.
So, my very favorites going back a ways. What kind of got me really into reading in my 30s, Deepak Chopra, top of the list. He really helped me tap into all of the things that I intuitively knew about myself as a kid, like my power to manifest my future. Number one, he was like, made me go, that's what that is. So Deepak Chopra, top of my list. Do you know who he is?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
And then from that, I, of course, got into Wayne Dyer also made me realize that I already know everything I need to know for the rest of my life, right? And more recently, I'm just looking down because I had made notes on my
Oh,
phone
sure.
last week.
Please, go ahead.
So right now, I still really like sales type of things, right? Like the
Yep.
rah stuff. So Selling Boldly, very good book for anybody. And I would say this would be a good, newcomer professional going into sales or
Yep.
business development kind of thing. Selling Boldly, Going for No, very good. And I'm reading right now, Failing Forward. This is another very important thing for professionals, for people who want to be, in leadership positions, especially like millennials coming up now that might be of the age that they're going into some junior leadership roles or even leadership, in some cases VPs and stuff. This whole idea of not failing is killing us, right? Because there is no way to succeed without failing.
True.
But I think the difference is that your failings are not you being a failure. There is a big difference. But
Yeah.
a lot of younger people and younger professionals I'm noticing are paralyzed by the fear of failure,
True.
which you can't be successful because there's no way to success but through failure. So the book Failing Forward is all about, work.
That, that's the one by John Maxwell.
Failing Forward, is that John Maxwell? Okay, yes it is. Yes it is. It's this whole idea that you have to embrace failure or failings as part of the process to get to where you want to go. And it's kind of like what I've always talked about in terms of confidence. Confidence is not this thing that you're born with. Confidence only comes because you refuse to let the fear stop you from doing what you must do to then become confident, right? Confidence only comes because you tripped and fell and failed and got back up again. And eventually you got good at it. And now you're confident in it. That's the only way. That's the only way to get it.
I agree. Yep. Yep.
So that's a huge message to young leaders coming up, is that you're going to fail. So how do you do it? How do you do it with grace? How do you do it with integrity, like owning it, like not blaming other people for it, right? There's a way to fail.
I
My
agree.
husband always said there's a way to go out of business, right? I won't get into that. But I will say there is a way to fail. Because if you're going to take everybody else down with you, and if you're going to not learn from it, I mean, there is a way to fail that allows you to succeed.
I agree. I agree, and that's quite beautiful. It reminds me of in my earlier years in my career as a marketer, we had this pitch. It's part of an internal training academy, and we had a pitch. Our team had a pitch to make, and we did. We were supposed to come up with a new idea for a product. How were we going to execute it? What was it going to be? Make projections and everything. Just and I remember when we were making that, we were quite nervous. We're about how many, 8 or 9 of us. We'd presented our deck, and we're now facing questions from the panel, and they said something about how are you going to ensure that this thing doesn't fail. I said, so I spoke first, and I said, well, we're going to fail. We're going to fail. I'm very sure there are going to be ways we're going to fail. And I could hear my teammates gasp, like, how could you say that? I said, well, we're going to fail, but the thing is, we're going to fail fast, and we're going to fail forward. And one of my teammates came over and said, took the mic and said, well, actually we are not going to fail. We will succeed. Like, yes, I know we're going to succeed, but this is the step. This is the step. And when you said it, brought back memories, and I was like, yep.
Yeah.
We all do need to learn how to fail and fail
Yes.
in order to succeed.
Yeah. And just as we're talking about this, it makes me realize the importance of conveying that there are, be the person that's going to fail forward, not fail in that way I described, where
Yeah.
you're unethical and you take
Yeah.
other people down with you. Like there are two ways to fail. I'm thinking this through as we're talking. There's two ways to fail. I actually didn't hear anybody talk about this in the books. I'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
What kind of failure are you, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Because there's two ways to fail, because we've all seen those people, right, that take everybody down with them, and they don't take accountability, all while trying to save face while they're failing, which is impossible. It ends up just going bad. So yeah, knowing how to deal with failure, I think, is really important.
That's true. That's true.
And that's why, at the foundation of all of this that we're talking about, Sochi, is, and I talk to people about this, you really have to know who you are and what you stand for. And a certain amount of that comes with age, but the sooner you can learn about yourself, the better. I find people who have this when they're younger are people who have had careers in the military, for example. Even at young ages, they understand who they are, what they're made of, what they will and will not do. I've seen that in a few people. People who have maybe gone through very traumatic, like truly traumatic things at younger ages, because they've been forced at a young age to really do that introspection, right? And like, who am I? What really matters to me? So I think for talking about leaders, you really have to know who you are and what your deal breakers are. I call them deal breakers, right? What your boundaries are, what your limitations are. Now, that is, again, why when you're talking to a 58 or 60-year-old woman, that's what you're going to get, because time alone has achieved that for her, for me, right? I know who I am. I know what I will and will not do. And I know what's important to me. So that makes leadership a lot easier, because you can lead in a way that is unambiguous. People know what to expect from you, and there's no ambiguity. It is laser focused on what you know for sure, your abilities, your direction, what you're capable of. So I think the more people can focus on knowing themselves really well is helpful. And books help you do that too.
Yep. They do.
Yeah.
They do.
I mean, reading is a great way to get to know yourself.
They do.
I was just looking at my list here. Like,
Yeah.
I'm such an eclectic person. My love of reading goes from, like Deepak Chopra, which is very much physics and spirituality mixed together. And then I go down to Emily Post, the centennial version of her etiquette book. So, which there's a lot to be learned from that as well. I look at our society today when I think of leadership, and we've lost the basics, which is consider other people before yourself. That's the basics. If we could just do that, we would be in a much different place today.
Yeah.
But, it's common to walk through a door and someone just let the door slam on you as you're right behind them, or, people cut in front of you and don't say, excuse me, or, it's just the niceties of being professional have been eroded away in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I have one more question. I mean, we're just about running up anyway. So I have a question about, I see you as a businesswoman. You're a mentor. You have to make time for your business. You have to make time for your family. You have to make time for your mentees, you have to make time for your clients. When do you make time to read?
Like I say, I've really embraced audiobooks. That's
Yeah,
helped me
sure.
keep a lot of books on the
Very
go.
helpful.
I read a little bit every night. Um, I get in the tub every night of life practically, and that's when I read for, sometimes it's just a few minutes, sometimes it might be a half an hour. But audiobooks have really helped me be able to digest a lot um, in my commute time when I'm going places. Yeah, so I really like audiobooks a lot.
I think we've already spoken a lot in different ways about all the ways that storytelling and culture of book reading or the culture of reading makes for effective communication in professional settings. We said a lot about that in different ways, but I would ask, in what way would you, and this drawing from your experience with your clients, with you know, your dealings in the community, in what way do you, recommend organizations can build or develop, or foster this culture of reading as a way to expand cultural awareness within not just cultural spreading expanding their cultural awareness, but also promoting continuous learning within their organizations.
I would say two things. Number one is back to that, courage and armor thing. I think organizations have to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable in the pursuit of understanding all the differences that make up us. So there's a little bit of vulnerability there. But I think things like, a book club in a company where people are reading the same book, and then however they get together to discuss that book. But what we have to be able to do in any kind of leadership role that you are, whether it's the leader in your family or the leader of a big corporation or a team leader in a company of many team leaders, you have to be willing to listen to other perspectives and really work them through without the lens of your previous perceptions about that type of situation or person. You've got to be able to put aside, I just find that so much these days is ego driven, and people want to hear themselves talk and they want to be right. If we're really going to move forward, especially with such diversity, we have to be able to listen like we're hearing something for the first time and then decide how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So reading can start a conversation, but if people don't feel like they can be truthful in the discussion of what they've read, then it's all for nothing.
I agree. Yep. Yep.
And that's back to what we talked about at the very beginning, which is, people are fearful these days of being quote unquote canceled, right? Or fired. Let's be honest, fired by stepping outside the boundaries of what is maybe even subliminally suggested that you can talk about and not talk about. And I have a young daughter in university. She talks about this. She said, I'm actually getting tired of being told how to think, and that I can't say something outside of the guidelines of whatever. So, it is, we can't progress is not the word. We can't ascend to another level of appreciating other people if we're unwilling to undo things that we were taught. I'm going to tell you something. I grew up in a small town, Sochi. There was not one person of color. Not one. A small town, an hour outside of St. John. And every single person that I knew from the age of birth to 18 looked exactly like me. So how many
Yeah.
inherent biases do I have?
Yeah.
Did I have? I can tell you a lot, because what I've learned in the last 5 years that I've been, like volunteering with different organizations in St. John, before I started doing more work per se in the last couple of years, I have had so many contradicting awarenesses, like rapid fire. But if I had been unwilling to acknowledge those to myself or other people, I'd be no further ahead now than I was then. So you have to be willing to challenge what you've been told or just believed because that's all you saw, you know. Um, you have to be willing to go there. And it's a little bit of work. That's probably why people don't want to do it. It actually is a little bit of work.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's hard. It's hard. Unlearning is hard. It's even harder learning new things, new perspectives, because you're so used to holding on to what you've always known. It's so much easier. It's not necessarily best for you, but it's just so much easier. It's how does that song go? Hello, darkness, my dearest
Yeah,
friend.
my old friend. Yeah.
So I understand that, but it's just not the way forward, really, is it?
No, no.
Uh,
And we're just humans. If we could just take the time and just stop and look at the person in front of you
yeah,
and be open and just have a conversation as two human beings, that changes everything.
yeah, it does. It does. It does. And a good way to change gear. So other than reading, which a lot of people see as a hobby, some people see as a job, how do you wind down?
How do I wind down? Well, I like dance music.
Yay!
That's the old fitness instructor coming out in me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I don't read to wind down.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Sometimes I dance around the kitchen by myself. I like to dance. I like to pet my dog. My wind down methods have changed since the pandemic.
Yes.
Which is why this question is thought provoking, because everything's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watch TV.
It's
I'm
valid.
like a I'm like a wacky, like I like sci-fi, like I'm big,
Oh
Star
my
Trek.
God. What are
Oh
you
yeah.
watching? What are you watching now? What
Well, no, I'm still kicking it old school, Sochi. I like
it
I like
doesn't matter.
I like Star Trek Next Generation. I like Deep
Thank
Space
you.
Nine. I
Yeah.
I
Thank you. No, it's
love
no,
that stuff.
Star Trek is timeless, right? Same with Star Wars. It's timeless because we're seeing new stories now. We're seeing new stories, and they're tying back and drawing from the old,
Yeah.
the old stories. So it's a whole universe out there. You're having. I don't know. So I'm sorry. You started something. It's hard to stop now. So Ashoka is the latest, right? In yeah. So tying back to Thorn and his story. So while you're still kicking old school, right? Check out Ashoka.
Okay.
I think you'll like it. It's a good way. It won't feel, because now you're still in the same universe, so you won't feel like you are betraying the old school. You still
Okay.
be, you still be in the universe, but this time you have a whole lot more context, more stories, more trajectories, and a whole lot more excitement, more or less.
Okay.
You're looking at the cinematography and everything, but
I will do that.
it's great you mentioned it. But I'm sorry, when you mentioned sci-fi, which I'm reading a lot of right now, sci-fi and fantasy, and when you said that, I'm sorry, you just took me.
Yeah, I've never get into reading it. Never get into reading it.
Sorry, but that's great. TV is valid. Anything else? You listening to any podcasts?
No, 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 not doing any podcasts currently. No.
Okay. Nah, well, that wraps it up for your media consumption. So at least we know what you're doing when you're not running, when you're not dancing. That's good.
Yeah, no, I like to be active. Like I work out a lot, still very much always weight trained, and because I was a competitive bodybuilder. So, going to the gym, to not exercise is a depressant. That's a good clip for people. You will find me in the gym. That's how I decompress. That's how I enjoy myself. That's how I relax. That's where I'm headed right now. After we're done, is exercise is an antidote to a lot of stuff right now.
Awesome. And I just want to rock your memory a little bit. What is this?
Okay. Oh my gosh. See, your audience is going to think I'm wackadoodle. So I am a herbalist. I studied almost 3 years, 22 years ago, to be a herbalist. So I am a natural medicine nut. I grow my own flowers, plants. So I made that for you. That is my famous. So it was a bit of a miss because that's a little bit too liquidy. It's a calendula lip balm because I had never made it in a lip balm before. But my calendula ointment is known far and wide. It fixes everything to do with your skin. To the point where my family makes fun of me. They're like, if someone was having a heart attack, you'd be like, oh, here's some calendula. Which clearly it will not work for that.
Yeah.
So I do. I make my own medicine. Teaching my granddaughter now how to do that. And this is something nobody knows this about me. I actually have Native heritage in my family on both sides. The only reason I don't talk about it is because I am from an area in Charlotte County where the federal government does not acknowledge the Passamaquoddy people as First Nation. But when you just jump across the river to Maine, the same people are recognized. So this is a whole different show. So the chief of the Passamaquoddy people in Charlotte County is a friend of mine. I mentored under him for years, but now he's just too busy fighting this fight to have time for me. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you're not getting this half screen of mine. Anyway, so I'm very much, I've always, ever since I was a little girl, very attached to my Native culture, which I always knew I had in my family. And my application is in that when the federal government does recognize the Passamaquoddy people as First Nations, then I will be in that group. But I've never, ever, you've got the scoop, I've never talked about this publicly. Nobody knows this about me. But my great-great-great-grandmothers on my mother's side and my father's side, that's where it is.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My God. I wasn't expecting that.
No, so the calendula, that is my passion for Mother Earth and only taking what you need and not more than you need, and paying respect to everything you get from the earth has always been right in me. Like I just always felt that way, even before I knew my heritage that was shared with me when I was probably 10. I always felt that connection. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that's the way I show my deep affection for people, is giving them.
I'm telling you, I mean, all I wanted to know was, how did you make this so good? Because you said you had these many talents. And I said, let me just remind you how I got this. So last year, I smelled it. I got a whiff, and I was like, "Is it to chew? Because it smelled so good." He said, "No, don't do that. Don't do that." I'm like, "Okay. What is it? It's a lip balm." Okay, I tried.
Yeah.
And I said, "I'd remind you, just in case you forgot."
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Your experience, your story. Again, if anybody was in doubt, I'm sure they will come away knowing this for sure. It's been really inspiring, and I'm sure when they engage with you, you want to let us know where people can meet you.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Professionally, people can see me on LinkedIn, and there's going to be some really big news if you want to follow my Instagram, which is
Nice.
Lorraine underscore E. Oh my land, what is it? But Lorraine Peters. If you look me up on
I'll,
Instagram.
I'll
Yeah.
definitely drop a note of it
Okay.
in,
All
in
right.
descriptions, so
Yeah.
you can check it out.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sochi. This was a lot of fun. I hope you got something from it.
Definitely a lot and more. Thank you so much, Lorraine. I appreciate your time. You've been very generous and very, very inspiring. Thankful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.